Hey y'all. Okay. I'm trying. I'm trying. But this bullshit is just bullshit. Okay. So this is the review for Kindred's episode 2, Sabina. Okay. Let's just start by first things first. There is no character named Sabina in the book, but yet they're going to make a whole episode titled after her. Wonderful. Okay, this is starting off great. All right. So Kevin, he ends back up in 1815 with Dana, which does happen in the book. And he says, well, what do I tell people, about how and why we're here? And she just says, well, just tell them we're travelers. Just, she's Dana is the one with the knowledge and who's read about different things in the book. So she's the one who kind of gives him a script, so to speak. But she manages to help the real Rufus. No, that's it. I said the real Rufus. She manages to help heal Rufus, who has gotten into trouble again. The little redhead boy, the Wayland's son, and has hurt himself. And he asked her um, how she managed to bandage him and fix him up. Kevin asked Dana, how did you manage to do that? Especially in the 19th century, they don't have a first aid kit. And she says, TV, and shrugs. And they keep walking. Now, I understand this is Hollywood, but Dana in the book had actually read medical books, had brief trainings, because by the 70s, she's not a doctor or anything, but by the 70s, you had certain kind of skills in the event of an emergency. And she was one of those people who had read about the history of medicine, that kind of thing. She was that kind of person. But true to form, black people are only allowed to be smart in cases where it is by luck or by accident. So she doesn't just get to be smart in this miniseries. Okay? She's not allowed to be that. Where are we trying to teach people about slavery or just trying to reflect it? I Because I'm not feeling it. Anyway, so Dana and Kevin, ride with Rufus in the back of the wagon back to the labor camp. Yes, I refer to plantations as labor camps. Okay. And if you have any questions about that, you can go and look it up. And there's a very good article on why we should refer to what enslaved Africans did and where they did it as labor camps, not as plantations. A plantation can be a land, it does not need slaves. It doesn't to be a plantation. Labor camps, however, make it completely difficult to forget that people were there being forced to work against their will for centuries. Okay, so yes, I will be referring to it as labor camps, and if you don't like it, anyway. All right, so anyway, they go back to the labor camp with Rufus, who was laid in the back of his wagon because his leg was broke and he was, fucking around like 9-year-olds do. So once they got there, Tom Whalen is trying to figure out why, Margaret Whalen is going crazy. She shoots back at Tom. They're yelling, and he gets quiet. Tom Whalen. Now, this is not the Tom Whalen, labor camp owner, enslaver, that we know from the book. Okay, he is very much in control, and Margaret capitulates to him and subjugates herself to him because he is not only the enslaver and master over the people that he enslaves, but of his family as well. Okay, he is very controlling. He's very much in control. And this kind of weak back and forth kind of bit, this wouldn't have happened. That was not his character in the book. So Dana starts answering the questions that Tom Whalen is asking her in regards to how they even got there. Like, why are they there? Why is Rufus hurt? But in the book, it becomes clear that Dana doesn't know her place, right? By answering a white man's questions and looking him in the eye. Kevin was supposed to be the only one that spoke, even though he appears to be talking to them. All right. She doesn't know her place. That was clear in the book. But instead, Dana answers the questions and Tom Whalen just kind of looks at her like he doesn't correct it, but he was correcting that in the book. Like, you're out of order. That's how I know something's wrong with y'all. This whole setup. He doesn't know about the teleporting and things like that, but he does correct her. So he asks Kevin on why he has a costume, basically because he has some graphic tee on from the 21st century. And he says, "Well, y'all can come in and eat. It's the least we could do since you brought my son back." So he invites Kevin in and then sends Dana to the cookhouse with the other enslaved people. So eventually, Kevin changes his clothes. He comes to get her, and they go into the Whalen household. He has to go to the cookhouse to pick her up. She gets like a, eventually like some slave things, but he gets a whole new suit, which they actually could have kept, but nevertheless, to reflect the times. Okay, so Dana suggests. So eventually, when Kevin comes to get her and they bring them back to the Wayland, the big house, if you will, Dana suggests, because the doctor is there trying to take care of Rufus, she says, "Well, look, you don't need to bleed the fever out. That's not necessary." And of course, the doctor, the white doctor, responds with, racist disdain and suggests that, what is she, a root doctor? And she doesn't know what she's talking about. And Kevin essentially needs to get his slave in check. Okay, she doesn't tell me what to do. Right, like I said, in the book, Dana had read about these kind of things. She had basic, medical knowledge. Like once you get things like CPR, kind of those basic things you knew if you were in the workplace. Okay, because she had this warehouse job before, or whatever. Um, so then they go to tend to Rufus. Now, Margie Whalen, the mother, okay, goes and tries to stay by him as the doctor gets ready to bleed him. And bleed him means essentially letting him bleed the fever out because they think that's going to work because that's 19th century medicine. Um, does that work? No. Okay, they do try to do that in the book. So Tom Whalen pulls her away from the bed because she's screaming, she's hysterical from the top of her lungs because she wants to get close to her son's bedside as they do it. Now, the next part is what fucks me up. So she's hysterical, and that part did happen in the book. Like she was very hysterical, she was very suspicious of why Dana was in the room, all these other things. So he slaps her clear across her face. Okay? And after she picks her face up like this, she slaps him clear across the face. And then proceeds to run to her son's bedside. Okay. I don't endorse domestic violence in any shape, way, or form, but I do recognize it when it exists. And okay, that never happened in the book. And perhaps there may have been such cases where there were exceptions to every societal rule of a particular period, like there always is. But to expect a white male slave owner to allow that level of perceived disrespect after acting toward his wife violently in front of enslaved people would upset the whole apparatus. Okay, so for example, if he slaps his wife and she doesn't capitulate as she does in the book, um, and there are enslaved people in the room around, they see that she can slap him clear up across his face, and he just takes it, and all of a sudden, like, she's in control. She's showing him he can't put his hands on her. Like that, that's not even real for that time. That's not even real. It's not real for the book. And he certainly would have, even if he would not have been inclined maybe to slap her back and may have been in shock to just keep his slaves and the order of things in order and in front of another white man, that would have never happened because it would have set the whole apparatus. They were, oh, his wife can smack him clear across the face. Oh, you know what's up. Like why? And this is like that fake white woman empowerment. Yeah, but she hit him back. Like, y'all put that in there for what? No, there are women who are victimized by their husbands even while being enslavers themselves and participating in that and not having any shame about it, but who are also still victimized by the male of the home. So like just miss me with the bull. So anyway, so it's not believable from the book standpoint or a historical one. All right, it's like they have the Tom Whalen acting like this sort of weak man, and that just was not his character. Um, whose character it really kind of is actually Rufus's once we see him as an adult in the book. He was kind of like the weaker, like he's just doing it because he's just, like he didn't really know. All right. So Tom Whalen also in the book was a heavy drinker and an alcohol. And what I mean by that is he wasn't just simply always drinking. His behavior was affected by his drinking, right? Like he couldn't stay on task. He become irritable and violent and those kind of things that keep you from being productive day to day. And that's not shown. And he was an abuser to everyone, um, including his son. And the book was designed to show really how absolute Kindred, the actual book by Octavia Butler, was designed to show how absolute and unwavering a slave owner or enslaver's power was over his labor camp and his family, and how the suppression of that led the anger that they had from being treated that way led to centuries of exploitation and domination. That was the point of the book, to do this. I mean, while it's a work of fiction, it's historically solid in terms of the way it depicts it. Like, they actually had a script. The script was the book, but y'all want to go and fuck it up. So Tom Whalen, after this whole incident with the bedside, him slapping her, she slapping him, and Rufus screaming because they trying to bleed him to death, or bleed the fever out of him. Tom Whalen can't pay the doctor ever. And he is strapped for cash because he spends it wrong. Even in the book. So he gives his slave Sabina away to pay the debt. And he says to the doctor, because she has a peculiar condition of the feet, she can hardly walk on this. There is something like that in the book, but her name is not Sabina. She's not like a main character. They're taking pieces of the book. And her life becomes an opportunity for exchange for his debt. And he convinces the doctor, well, she'll be great for experimentation. I'm pretty sure there's some things you can do to her. That, in and of itself, was actually very, very common. All right? With doctors who would utilize slaves to experiment on, i.e., the reason why you had the science of gynecology was because they would take black women alive and dead, but especially alive against their will, and study them so that the health and science of white women's bodies could be preserved because ours weren't valued. Okay? So, look, there are plenty of opportunities to teach here, but y'all fucked it up. Hulu, FX, I'm mad. So Rufus says to Dana, because we get back to that. All right. As his father gives away a whole human being um for his broken leg. Anyway, so Rufus says to Dana, because she's still in the room as she's looking at a book, he asks if she can read, and so she tells him yes. And he warns her that if her father catches a servant, that's the word he's using now, servant, reading, he'll treat you like you stole something, even if you're only looking at the pictures. In other words, he was implying that she would be beaten. Using the word servant from Rufus's mouth is a way I felt like people who wrote this were trying to delineate him from the other whites who refer to black people in this film readily as slaves, or the N word, which we're starting to hear more and more as the episode goes on. Um, and they're trying to make him appear innocent in ways that, once again, allows white people to appear not all bad. And, like I said in my first review of the first episode, it's amazing to me that white people always have to exist in a space where not all of them are bad. See, some of them are good. But in a film where you have black people, you can't really have a black person or all black people who are just all good. Or victims. Because chattel enslavement is the owning of human persons and treating them in deed and policy as property, as in not human beings. Yes, that does make you a victim. Now, how someone has to endure day to day will vary from person to person. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend like that's not victimhood. Okay? So I don't want to hear about all these white people that don't do nothing who continue to vote. Only 4% of Americans ever even owned slaves. They owned a lot because we had the most out of any country, not we. But America had the most out of any country at any point in time, and it gets up to 4 million. Brazil, the Portuguese who colonized there, who colonized and brought the most slaves over, only get up to 1 million at a time. But that's because the sugar plantations are so, the sugar and coffee is such a harsh, brutal crop, and because of the way they treat them, they die quickly and more quickly. But in America, because it was more costly to go back and forth to West Africa, only 5, I hate to say only, but only 5% of those in the Middle Passage are brought over from West Africa, and they force breed enslaved Africans, which is traumatic within itself. Okay? But we'll get to that in the next episode. Anyway, So I say all this to say little acting for Rufus is also terrible. I know he's a kid, but when you put kids in movies, they are supposed to be decent actors. They are not supposed to appear like he just goes from one emotion to the next and not in a believable way, like in an overly dramatic way, as if, when you were like in third grade and y'all would sit around in a circle and like everybody may have been reading a play, but everybody had a character they would read, and that's how your teacher would know you're paying attention if you forgot your line because you were supposed to be looking for your name and reading along with everybody else. Um, and she wanted you to read it with like proper pronunciation. So somebody's yelling, you're yelling because you recognize the exclamation mark. If you read it in a normal voice like this, that's because you recognize that it's a period. That's what Rufus is giving me right now, and I'm just it's corny. I don't like it. It's wrong, and I couldn't help myself. So, as someone who loves the book, this is my second review. Don't worry, I'll be back for episode 3. Talk to y'all soon. Bye.